comes to our experts in payroll from one perspective or the other. And so if there's any particular questions that come up during the course of our class today, this is our last class of this masterclass for the conversion of People's Choice. There will be other webinars, office hours in the future, but that'll be open to all People's Choice desktop or PC online licensed users will have access to those future office hours. So the time to be thinking of if you're going to have your data converted again to go live at the end of the year, or if you're going to take your existing converted data and just get it all prepped so that when you close up the year and open up 2025, you just start your year that way. If you are going to have a second conversion, you will need to schedule it. We would prefer that you actually email support@safechoice.com or use the request link that you would like to have schedule to have your backup converted, and then we can contact you. Barb will be doing most of the monitoring of those particular conversions, and kind of depends if you're just using payroll, you could make a backup and uploaded as soon as you've done your last payroll for 2024. If you're using accounting and maintaining a checkbook, then you'll want to wait until December 31st to make a backup to get converted. But you'd want to have your last payroll completed. And then there's a few things as far as uploading a backup to be converted. Obviously complete all the payroll transactions, including your payroll deposits. If you reconcile, try and do that. I mean, if you have a payroll right away in January, it's not critical that you have everything reconciled, because if you have like a January 3rd or something payroll, you're probably not going to have your PC Classic data reconciled at that point, but we could convert it and do the reconciliation in there. If you are using accounts receivable, though, you do want to make sure all your undeposited receipts are deposited and all unapplied payments are applied as well as obviously your payroll. So those are the things to keep in mind. And like I said, I think if we haven't heard from participants by December 10th, we'll probably start contacting people to say, are you going to go live or convert? But if you would just send what your intentions are to either that request form or an email to support@safechoice.com, that would be great. So we're going to do similar to last week. I have some topics to cover. But there are a few things that you can bring up. If I know there's one thing that I'll address a little bit here in the beginning. Again, you can enter them in chat or raise your hand, and we'll respond to that at the time. So this is the main things I wanted to get covered today. Is setting up a bonus pay type to use for Christmas and special bonus checks. Includes a net to gross calculator spreadsheet that I mentioned. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this is it will also highlight some of the options that I have told you about as far as suppressing deductions and benefits and those types of things that was covered in, I believe, actually our first session. And so you get an idea of how those optional tools can be used. We do get quite a few people that say, what do we do with this W-2 form when they check the step 2 box C when you're incorporating other payrolls? That there is a worksheet that goes with from the IRS. This is the link. I posted this link into the chat, or you can just do a search on the W-4 form and just see here. If you go to that link, or you just search on estimator, or when you're on the form itself, this is what it'll take you to, and it's a worksheet that the employee has to fill out. And basically the worksheet is telling how much you're supposed to withhold. So the responsibility isn't that you got them set up to withhold correctly. It's their responsibility whether they under withhold or over withhold their federal taxes. So we'll go into a little bit how that can be implemented in using the form. I did bring up the form. If you're familiar with it, it's when this box here is checked, and this amount here is the amount that they want withheld. And there's really two things. They may want a flat amount withheld each time, or they may want a percentage based on the worksheet that the tax they have factors in that their taxes is going to be X percent of their gross taxable wage for the year. And then we can actually modify the employee setup to calculate on that specific percentage versus using the tax tables. If you want to go into the actual form, you can just search on W2024 form, and it's going to take you to the IRS site where you can view the 2024 form. And that's what's going to be used, I guess, at this point for 2025 if you get new employees. But if you pull up this form from the website, if you click here, it also takes you to this estimator. So there's a couple of different ways to get to this estimator. And it's pretty thorough, but like I said, it's really the responsibility of the employee. So if they check that box too, basically what they'll be telling you is when they fill out the form, oops, sorry about that. That this stuff is going to be filled out, and so that's their responsibility, and you just implement it accordingly. And one thing that I didn't do with all the converted data is I didn't update the tax tables for 2024. I discovered that wasn't done as part of the conversion process. I'm going to review that because that's what you're going to be going through when you start your payroll year for 2025, is you'll be sent a download to install, and you'll have to go in into your company and update the tables, and we'll briefly do that. And then I'm just going to show you some recent changes that have been added to the system. And then there's some add-on modules, even though I don't think any of these things probably apply to you, but at least you're aware of the other things that are available in the People's Choice family of products here. And we can then go into any of these things that you want to bring up, whether it's this one, and then we'll back up into that. So the first thing I'm going to go into is I put in there, if you go onto the customer portal, you can download a spreadsheet. And when you open it up, it's a very simple spreadsheet. It's already going to have some figures put in there. But what it's designed to do is you want to give a Christmas bonus to somebody and you want it to be a flat amount. Well, unfortunately, Christmas bonuses are taxable, and so it's subject to Social Security check. So you don't want a gross amount of $500 because then their bonus ends up being, 470 whatever dollars after you take out the Medicare and Social Security. So if you want to you can pull this up and use these particular figures. But if, for instance, you decide to know, I want a $1,200 bonus, you can just type in the $1,200. That means the gross check that you need to create would be $1,299.40, and then it's going to calculate the tax. Now, we may have to edit the tax by a penny or two so that the net check actually shows up as $1,200, which again is another feature that you can edit whatever's been calculated to what you want, and that's how we can use that particular tool. So what I have done, let's see here, let's go ahead and look at. So what I've done here is I went ahead and added a pay type, and I went through the process of adding it to the template and adding it to the employee using those tools I showed in prior sessions. But in the pay types, I went ahead and I created, if you remember the company we had, it was in Maine and New Hampshire. And I only created it for one in this particular situation. And I would have created two different bonuses, one for Maine and one for New Hampshire. You'd want to edit the taxes to 0 for federal and state typically. Unless it's a really big bonus, then you may want to factor in maybe a 10% of that gross amount as a net federal withholding or state withholding. But in most cases, most leave it at 0 because the amounts of a bonus isn't going to impact their federal withholding or state withholding that much. But once you've added the pay type, and it's just a typical pay type, but labeled it what account you wanted to use. And remember, my Maine employees are on a bi-weekly and my New Hampshire employees are on a weekly. And we're just going to do the bi-weekly. And you would set it up, it's taxable, so we still have to set up the employers. And then I had gone into the employee templates and went into our weekly and went into pay. And I added, clicking new, I added bonus to this. Now, you don't have to have a bonus pay type. You could still just use their hourly, or if you, I doubt you want to assign it to holiday pay if you set up a holiday pay, because it isn't a holiday. It's just over and above, their performance. You're rewarding them. But we set it up, and then after adding it to the template, I went through the process, and I went ahead and I added it to Sally Fields and Audrey Smith. So once that was completed, then now those employees have those pay types. Then the other thing that I recommend is if you're doing something like this, is that you don't use your normal pay group. Like typically you're going to have your main one set to yes, so that when you go in to enter payroll for do bi-weekly, we only have 2, but it's our typical. But for a lot of you, you might have a whole bunch of here and you don't want to goof that up because all you do is go in and edit the hours each pay period. So we have what we call a one-time adjustment, and that's what I recommend for a Christmas type bonus. So you want to exclude this and include this and go into enter pay data. So what I did is I went ahead and pulled up my 2 employees. I assigned the bonus, and I put in a wage override at $541.41, and this was based on my worksheet that I wanted to have a $500 bonus, and so my gross needed to be $541.42, and I wanted Audrey to get a $750 bonus, and so that's how I did the 812.13. So it's an override. This is always used as an override. And then when you click done, then you still go ahead and calculate. Now, before you calculate, the other thing in highlighting the options is I've gone in and I've checked this box. In anything that was a deduction, I don't want to deduct. Anything that's a benefit, I don't want to calculate any benefit. So this is how you shut off these deductions. And I actually usually shut off the automatic pay period, because what I've done in advancing, when you do next pay run, if you do those things before, I've had to go in and I put everything as Christmas Day as far as the pay period and the posting of the check. So when you go to calculate, it's warning me that I've marked those deductions, and so, which is a good thing, because if you don't, when you go to do the next live regular payroll, it's going to give you this warning if you forgot to, turn them back on again. But it's okay to continue for us in this particular case. And so you get this calc report. Now, in this case, it's calculating the tax, and we're just going to zero out of the tax. And so our goal is to get this net check to be $500 and $750. And the way you do that is you would go into edit results, and you would go in and you see this 541. So we're not going to take any federal withholding out. So we're just going to zero that out. We're going to zero that out. And oh, it's still only $499. So what I would recommend there is we change this to a 6. I think it's right. So now it's 500. But if you do that, then you'll want to go ahead and change this one to match that. So you still want to have the two match. So you want to make sure that in the taxes that the Social Security the Social Security matches this Social Security. And then, like I said, zero. And you can see up here that the net's now $500. And so you would go and do that same thing with the other employees. And oh, this one's 715.01. So we want to change one of these to 7 and so that the $750 is the net check. So once this is done, if you go in and look at the calc report, you'll see that those adjustments are made. The net check is 500 and 750. And so then you can go ahead and create the checks. We're going to back up. And if you're using direct deposit, there is also an option to say, I don't want to use direct deposit for this pay run, because they want to give them that check that says $500 on it versus a pay stub. Maybe they put the check in a Christmas card or something like that. So you would go ahead and create the checks, and then you will see that when you go to do the calc report, it has the check numbers, it has what their net check was. And so then a good idea at that point really is to go back so you don't forget and select all or unselect all and unselect all. And you still probably want to go ahead and click this. Although what's going to happen when you go to process next pay run, it's not going to change. You're still going to have to type in what your next pay period run will be. So that's a quick way of how to do a Christmas bonus, kind of take you through the process as a little bit of review of how to add a pay type, how to add pay type to a template, and how to go ahead and add that new updated template to the existing employees. Now, the one thing you may need to do, you do the override, so you don't need to go in and assign it. If you noticed, it came up as a zero wage when you did that particular calculation. So hopefully that is helpful to you. And like I had mentioned, this spreadsheet is up on the customer portal, and you can just download it. And it's a very simple spreadsheet to run. I had suggested, and we may have an update on this that could factor in if you are going to withhold some federal or state tax, that will maybe update the formula on this. But in most cases, people don't withhold the federal and state. They just withhold the Social Security and Medicare. So going back to our agenda here, we've gone into looking at the estimator for the W-4. So I don't know if you have any questions on that. We can cover that at the end. Like I mentioned before, some of the converted data we sent did not have that tax tables updated. And the process for doing that, and if you don't know, and this is the process, you'll do it, like I mentioned, at the end of the year when you get your new tax tables for 2025. We go into, we can use our existing one, but you could go into taxes, and there's update tax tables. And whether you've done it or not, it doesn't hurt at all to do it again. It isn't like it's going to goof anything up. It's going to come up. It should say 2024. When you get your tax table update at the end of December, and you go to do this step, if you've installed it, then this should say 2025 for your next payroll year. And so you would click next and click finish. And I guess maybe I should just back up a little bit. Before you do that, you would install this, but you are going, and you'll get prompted to this when you go into, if your computer is in 2025, you're going to get a prompt to go ahead and change payroll year. You'll want to go in and you want to say you want to click a new for 2025. So you would go new, and then it's going to say make sure you're done with your payroll on that. So I'm not going to go through that process right now because I'm not ready for the 2025 tax year yet. But that's going to be part of the process. And there'll probably be a video within the release of the tax tables that will walk you through this particular process. So the other items that I had on the agenda, was to just kind of go over some of the new features and so forth. If you noticed on my company list or my menu on this particular, I've turned on all the optional modules that are available in this particular demo. So besides what you normally have been seeing, the new items you're seeing here are escrow accounts, job cost, and time and billing. And those are available as add-ons. So the new things that have been added, had one of our customers who said, we have a lot of foreign customers and we need to use their weird zip code format. And the standard format in People's Choice has been the US zip code format, which is all numbers. And a lot of foreign zip codes have letters and numbers and different sequence. So if you're going to use, like if I try to change this to 9K, it won't take the K or the L. So, but if you back out of this, change this to there, then it should allow you to do a 7KL 884, whatever the format is for your foreign country. And then of course you'd fill in the foreign country. So that's been added recently to the system. And another one, I think most of you know that when you go to do invoicing, you do now have the option to email invoices. That when you go to print, you're given the option to email. Well, we had it for invoices, we had it for sales orders, but we didn't have it for quotations until now. So now when you go in to pull up a quotation, you are able to email the quotation just like you can email an invoice. So those are some of the newer features that are available in the standard product, whether that would be Premier primarily because of the customers and the quotations as part of the Premier package. So it doesn't apply to a lot of you, that's why. And the escrow is used mainly by lawyers or real estate. And it's what it gives is you track your, well, if you've purchased a house or whatever, where you give them a $5,000 earnest payment, well, that money doesn't go into the realty's company. It goes into a trust account or escrow account, and then it's dispersed when it's needed. And so you would set up individual items, and then there's a report that you can generate on the trust reports that will show the balances of all your individual escrow accounts. And so if you wanted to look at escrow balances as of today, you can see that we have 3 different clients that have, this is their balance. And so theoretically, if you add these together to $6,800, when you get a bank statement from the bank for the escrow account, it should say you have a balance of $6,800. And that's closely regulated. If they don't match, you can get into a lot of trouble in those particular instances. But otherwise, the interface is much the same as a regular check interface. When you go into here, it's going to bring up a screen where you can select the client. Now, I picked an existing client, and so you can select the client and bring up what they have in their balance. And then when you write a check, it's going to subtract it from that balance. This does not tie into the general ledger system. This is a totally standalone check system just for trust accounting. So similar add-on module for called job cost or project cost. It can be used by nonprofits if they're tracking grants and so forth. And what you can do, it's going to be set up on a cash or accrual, but however you set it up, you can have like your own mini chart of accounts of the different categories of income that you might have and your different types of expenses that you might have in any particular job. So this is all your kind of front end customization. And then once you've done that basic setup, when you go to create a job, and we'll just pull one up here. So this is what I wanted. You can go in and you can actually assign a budget of what you expect. So this is where the grant tracking, if you're applying for grants and you want to track it, especially if you're going to track a grant that goes across fiscal years, you can estimate, well, we were awarded this grant X, so you can go ahead and budget that as part of the income. And then you can also go in if you want and budget for what type of expenses that you're going to have. And with that particular thing in mind, there are the job reports. And so you could do an actual to budget and detail. Typically, this just gives you like an income statement format. And we'll just pull up that new job and click print. And we haven't done any transactions, but you can see the budget. We didn't set up a budget yet, but so just like a regular budget in your general ledger, you can do that on a particular job to job basis. And the way this is updated is, what did I set this up on an accrual basis. So on an accrual basis, if you were invoicing, I'll just pull up an invoice. An option shows up if you have job cost that you can go down here and you can bring up the job and you can, it's going to be, let's just say finish work and put in the amount of, if you wanted to put in the full amount, you could. The total invoice, oh yeah, we have a payment against the invoice on this, but that's how that's applied. And if you were using bills or accounts payable, when you go in and enter in a bill, you also have the job. So when you enter in the bill, you can pull up the job and apply a portion of it or all of it to a particular job. Or where this comes into play a lot is if this $500 may be part of two jobs. And so when you go to do the job, you can pull up one job and apply a certain amount and then add a new line and it's an expense and whatever kind of an expense it might have been. And so if it was only like, say, $300, then you could go and pull up another job and apply the balance, or if only 300 of it was applied to a job and the rest of it was just overhead expenses, then you could just leave it at that 300. It allows this warning you, did you want it to balance with your bill? Some people want to have it tied directly, so everything on that would be applied to a job, and that's what that warning is for. So, and then of course, there's job reports that are available, job actual to budget, very similar to the escrow or the income part of it. So don't want to get into a lot of details. It probably doesn't apply to you. But then there's also, and this is mainly for lawyers and accountants who may want to use the time and billing. And it's got the same interface, and but it also reports on a cash basis. And it gives a place for entering time and a special billing laid out specifically for accountants or lawyers, or I guess we have an engineer who bills by time that uses this system. So you can go into there and then you can go back to accounting, and that's where you could get back to where you can go and enter in payroll and so forth. So kind of gives you a broad scope of the family of products that are associated with People's Choice Accounting. And maybe you're associated with a nonprofit or something that might find something like this useful. So to go back to our agenda, we basically covered everything that I wanted to get covered. And here's where there's some other ones. Is there any questions that have come here? Or any of these topics that people would like to cover? Or in any of these topics that people would like to cover? Most of them we have covered over the course of this masterclass. And so, but we could still review or go into a little bit more detail if there's some questions on how we would handle certain things. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today. I know I ran through a lot of this fairly quickly. A lot of it was review and but applied in a specific application like the Christmas bonus, but it did make use of the employee templates of creating new pay types and using that one-time calculation group that separate from your normal pay period group. So I read here the hours shown in the calc report when processing payroll are related to 40 a week. Do employees see that on the pay stubs? The hours are inputted by you for the overtime. They're the question you might be asking. Let me go back to pulling this up. Let's go into here. Into that. And there's a setting in the pay types. Whether it's, I'll just go down to hourly. The hourly biweekly is a pay type, but you can tie it to the hourly weekly here. So if this box is checked, then anything you enter in, if they work 45 hours, you can just put 45 hours in the regular pay. And when it goes to calculate, it'll automatically take everything over, in this case, 40 hours and make it overtime. If you were doing the same thing is available on the, like each one has now, this is enabled. And you would, if you were doing it bi-weekly, you would want to start overtime at 80 hours probably. And so if you typed in 85 hours, it's going to automatically put it in as overtime. However, most of the people that I've worked with want to shut this off because overtime isn't always strictly by working over 40 hours. There are especially some government jobs that any particular day, if you work over 8 hours, you get overtime for any time over 8 hours. So in a certain real world situation, they may not work on a particular day. And so they're, in the case of a weekly, their total hours are only 38 hours. But of those 38 hours, 8 of them could be overtime hours under what I just described, that they worked over 8 hours. So there's different reasons why people don't want to have this automatically enabled. But
Roger,
yes,
it also doesn't work like if you work 44 hours one week and 36 hours the other week. Most of the time, the mandate is that you still have to pay overtime for that week. So even if the hours added up to 80, one week there wouldn't be overtime. So you'd still have to do like 76 and then do 4 hours of overtime or whatever it was that they worked that one week. So that's also doesn't get caught in that situation. So that's the other reason why you would not want to have that enabled.
good point. So did that answer your question, Linda? If you don't use that, do you manually have to assign an overtime rate to each employee? Well, in the actual, whether you use that or not, when you're in an employee and you bring up their pay types, you got hourly, weekly, or you got overtime weekly. Well, this is 12 hours on regular, but when you select overtime, you would want to go ahead and make this 18. So that when they go into, when you select it, they're going to get $18 an hour versus the $12 an hour.
You would also, when you are entering the payroll, you would put in how many hours of regular pay and then how many hours of overtime pay.
So you can see in this case, we can make this, or we're on weekly. So let's just say it was a typical, and they worked 5 hours overtime. So it's going to calculate 40 at 12 and 18 at 5 hours. So, and then I'll add the two together and it'll show that on the pay stub what their hourly rate was for each of those pay types. Defaults to the employee rate. This default, this is what you set up in the employee. This over here, we used it for the Christmas bonus, but it can be used on the fly. It's like, oh, I was going to give them a $2 raise. I don't want to mess with it right now. I want to get payroll done. So you can go ahead and just change this to $14. And so if doing that, it's going to calculate the 40 times 14 versus the 40 times 12. So that's how the wage override can be used. It can be used on another place it would be used, like if you set up a travel reimbursement pay type where you're just going to put in a 1 here and then you just put in the total of the reimbursement that you're giving them. Or I mean, you could set it up that you give them 35 cents a mile or up to 55, what it is now, and type in how many miles they drove, and then it would calculate. But most people just use the quantity of 1 here and then put in the total of the amount here. Now, what I just described typically is a reimbursement. So that pay type is going to be set up with no taxes taken out of it. And it's not going to be on the W-2 or anything like that. So that would be part of the pay type setup, whether it's taxable or not.
Roger, I don't know if you mentioned this, but I'll just interrupt and mention it quick. That the quantity is, I always call that the multiplier of either the default wage or the wage override. And then if there's no hours associated with it, you leave that second column just at 0. So like whether it was for a bonus or whatever it was, it wouldn't be associated with hours. So just remember the quantity is your multiplier and your default and your wage override are what you multiply by.
Do we have anybody with us? because that's how the salary pay types work. Or you'd have a salary, you put in a 1, but you've set up your salary that if it's weekly, it's actually equal to 40 hours. But it's going to take 1 as the multiplier, and then the default wage is the gross salary for that pay period. But it reflects 40 hours of work, and it's mainly for workman's comp. I don't know, you've been dealing with some of that as it applied to the nonprofit and overtime recently, Barb, that how you do this can impact how much you have to pay somebody if they're on salary.
There's actually a lawsuit right now that has, I think, knocked that back again. But you'd want to pay attention to what the federal wage law says, that you have to pay a minimum of a certain dollar amount for salary, or you have to pay overtime. So that's to protect workers. And I don't know where that law is going to fall by January 1st at this time.
Because it's something like $56,000.
58,000, I believe. It's been like 35.5. Then they raised it to 40-some thousand July 1st. And then as of January 1st, it was supposed to go up to between 58 and 59,000, somewhere in there. I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but that was so that you stay legal. Otherwise, if you pay them less than that, then you have to track hours and pay them overtime if they work over 40 or 80, whatever it is, or, whatever the rules are at that time. So someone somewhere I saw sued over that law, and so far they won. So that I don't know if that law is going to go into effect or not, but it's something to keep in mind and check on to make sure you're covering what you need to cover as far as the law and your employees goes.
So it's tied to the number of hours for the salary, and it's to prevent abusing salaried employees by making them work 50 hours, but they only get paid the equivalent of 40 hours. And so that's what it's factoring in for that minimum salary amount. That if you're going to make them work this many hours for this amount, then any hours over that, you're going to have to pay overtime. But like I say, we don't know the specific rules, but if that's just something that you would want to research. So any place you could use the auto 1.54. You mean for it to automatically apply? I mean, I can,
Yeah, you mean
yeah, what I'll do is I'm in the weekly here. Oops. I'll go back into setup, go into pay types, and we'll go back to hourly, weekly, and we'll recheck this. And it applies to this overtime. And so when you go back into run a payroll and we go into enter pay data, I'm just going to change this to 0, 0. I could set everything to 0 up here if I was doing it to everybody. But I'm going to say we're going to pay them 50 hours. And go into here and calculate. Calc report. And did it do? I don't have the same people here. Do I have the wrong group? No, I guess I need to exclude that. Exclude this. There we go. So you could see that they entered it in as 50 hours, but it took the 40 And then it took the extra 10 and moved it into the overtime. So that's how it'll do it automatically. But for the things that I mentioned and Barb mentioned, there's situations where this doesn't work as it's needed, depending on how overtime is calculated. Like I said, Barb suggested in a biweekly one, if they worked overtime in one of the weeks, they need to get earned, or in another one, if they get paid overtime for working over 8 hours every day on any particular day, then overtime applies. And then so these rules don't work, but it's just standard. So did that answer your question, Linda? So were there any other questions that people wanted to get covered? Well, hopefully you found this class useful. We've tried to structure it to really apply to people that were used to the People's Choice Classic accounting program and how you make the transition to the upgrade. And we, over the course of the 7 weeks, have covered most of those functions that we talked about, the ones that I listed here. If you look through the list, if you've attended every class, you'll see, yeah, I remember him doing that. I remember him doing that. And same way with our payroll and checkbook. So otherwise, if there are no other questions, it looks like we're still within our budget. So, but if there's no other questions, like I mentioned about making the decision to go live, I'd like to get that scheduled. If you're planning to do it to start the first of the year and you want to continue through the end of the year with People's Choice Classic, there's some timing issues and there's scheduling issues because it's a very busy time of the year. We're sending out tax updates and helping people with the W-2s. You can convert your data. If you converted your data and you've been running and keeping it side by side and don't need to convert, you can use the new version to process your W-2s and 1099s. But otherwise, you'll still have the option if you still want to do People's Choice Classic through the end of the year. You'll be given the Safe Choice e-filer like you've done in the past couple of years to process your W-2s and 1099s. And as we announce other webinars or office hours, you'll be included in that list. And then if you were given some support as part of your conversion upgrade, and I kind of steered people in the beginning to save that support time for when you go live, and if there's particular questions, then we can work one-on-one with you at that point in time. So if there's nothing else we need to discuss, Barb, Christine, can you think of anything that maybe we should bring up?
Not at this time.
Okay. Well, I appreciate all the participation that you've had. I know some of you on here have been here every week, and I hopefully you found it useful. So we're going to go ahead and end the meeting. I'm going to stop the recording.